My name is Yusuf, or it was Yusuf. I still use it, because names carry history, and I do not want to pretend my history does not exist. Yusuf is a name from the Quran. The prophet Joseph, the one who was thrown into a pit by his brothers and who survived and who forgave them. I did not choose this name with any knowledge of what my life would become, but I have thought many times since that whoever gave me that name may have been more prophetic than they knew. I am going to tell you a story today that I have told very few people in its complete form. Not because I am ashamed of it. I am past shame, I think, or at least I am learning to be, but because the complete form of this story is long and difficult and contains things that are not easy to hear. I want you to stay with me through the difficult parts, because the difficult parts are where the story actually lives. The easy version of a testimony, the version that skips the worst of it and goes straight to the transformation, that version does not honor what it actually cost, and it does not help the person watching who is in the middle of their own worst parts. So, let me tell you the complete version. I was born in Kano, in northern Nigeria, in 1986. Kano is one of the oldest and most historically significant Muslim cities in West Africa. Islam in Kano is not recent or imported or thin. It goes back centuries, embedded in the culture, the language, the architecture, the rhythm of daily life. To be Hausa Fulani and to be from Kano is, in many respects, to be Muslim in the same way that you are your mother's child, not by choice, but by nature, by origin, by the substance of everything you are made of. My family was Muslim. My father was a trader, a man of business, practical and disciplined, who took his religion seriously without being consumed by it. My mother was a woman of extraordinary personal faith. She prayed with a consistency and a sincerity that I admired even as a child, even before I understood what prayer was supposed to be. We were not a wealthy family, but we were not poor. We were ordinary, in the best sense of that word. We had food and shelter and school and a community. We had enough. And then, when I was 14, I met a man who changed the direction of everything. His name was Sheikh Musa. He was not from Kano originally. He had come from somewhere further north, and he had studied in Sudan and in Saudi Arabia. And he brought back with him a version of Islam that was different in texture and in temperature from the Islam I had grown up with. The Islam of my childhood was warm and familiar. It was woven into the ordinary fabric of life, into greetings and rhythms and food and community. The Islam that Sheikh Musa brought was sharper, more urgent, more demanding. It had edges. He ran a madrasa, a religious school, on the outskirts of the city, and he had gathered around him a group of young men who were hungry for exactly what he was offering. Young men who felt, as I felt at 14, that the world was not right, that something had gone badly wrong, that the poverty and the corruption and the Western cultural influence they saw around them was an offense against God that required a response. That Islam, true Islam, pure Islam, the Islam that Sheikh Musa described, was the answer, was the only answer. I was exactly the kind of young man Sheikh Musa was looking for. I was intelligent, and I was angry, and I was searching for something to belong to that was larger than myself. I had questions. Not questions about whether God existed, I had no doubt about that, but questions about what God required, about what the right response to an unjust world looked like, about how a serious Muslim man was supposed to act in a world that seemed to have gone very wrong. Sheikh Musa had answers for all of those questions. His answers were clear and certain and required no ambiguity and no sitting with doubt. That clarity was enormously attractive to a 14-year-old boy who was looking for something solid to stand on. I joined his circle. Within a year, I was one of his most devoted students. Within 3 years, I was teaching the younger students. By the time I was 20, I was running a youth group connected to the madrasa, a group of young men who were being shaped by the same vision, the same urgency, the same sharp-edged certainty that we had been given. I believed, with everything I had, that what we were building was righteous, that God was pleased with us, that we were on the right side of history and of heaven. I am not going to give you a detailed account of everything that happened during those years. I will be honest with you. Some of what I was part of was dangerous. Some of it crossed lines that I can now see clearly, but that I could not see at the time, because the framework I was inside did not have those lines in it. The framework I was inside had a different map entirely. In that map, what we were doing was not only permitted but required. I want to say something about this carefully, because I think it is important. I was not a stupid person. I was not a cruel person by nature. I was not someone who enjoyed violence for its own sake, or who had no conscience. I was a person who had been given a framework that had replaced my conscience with a set of certainties. And within that framework, things that would have been clearly wrong in any other context were not only permissible, but holy. This is how ordinary people end up doing things that, from the outside, seem impossible to understand. It is not that the ordinary person disappears. It is that the framework absorbs him and redirects him and convinces him that what he is doing is right. I believed I was right for more than a decade. And then something happened that the framework could not absorb, and the whole thing cracked open. I was 31 years old. I had been part of Sheikh Musa's movement for 17 years. I was, by this point, a significant figure within it, respected, trusted, given authority over a substantial number of young men. I had a wife, a woman from a family within our movement, a woman who believed what I believed and who supported what I was doing. I had 2 small sons. I had a house. I had a life that, inside the framework I inhabited, looked like success, like righteousness, like the favor of God made visible. And then there was a night. I will not describe what happened in specific operational detail, for reasons I think you can understand without me explaining. What I will tell you is that on this particular night, something happened in front of me that the framework I had been living inside for 17 years simply could not make righteous, no matter how I tried to apply the doctrine to it. I watched something happen to a person, a specific, individual, human person, that my framework said was justified, was necessary, was in service of a holy cause, and I looked at that person's face and I thought, this is wrong, not strategically wrong, not tactically wrong, wrong in some absolute sense that was deeper than any doctrine I had been given. That thought, that simple, unbidden, undeniable thought, this is wrong, was the crack. It was the first thought I had had in 17 years that came from underneath the framework rather than from inside it. And once it was there, I could not make it go away. I tried. I want to be honest about this. I did not immediately abandon everything and turn toward light. I tried to suppress the thought. I tried to cover it with doctrine. I tried to replace it with the certainties I had been given. I prayed in the way I knew how to pray, asking God to restore my conviction, to take away the doubt, to make me once again the person I had been the day before. But the thought did not go away, and in the weeks that followed, more thoughts came. They came in the night mostly. They came in the spaces between prayers, in the quiet moments when the framework's noise died down and something underneath it had room to speak. They were not theological arguments. They were not intellectual questions about Islamic doctrine. They were human questions. The same question, really, in many forms. What kind of God wants this? I had been given, for 17 years, a God who required, who demanded, who measured, who approved of certain actions that I was now, in the quiet of my own heart, unable to approve of. And this raised a question I could not suppress. What if the God I had been given was not, in fact, the God who was actually there? What if the framework I had been living inside was not a window onto God, but a wall built in front of him? This is a devastating question for a person who has given 17 years to a cause. It is not a comfortable question. It does not arrive gently. It arrives like a demolition, not of a building you are tired of living in, but of the only building you have ever known. And you stand in the rubble of it with nothing overhead, and you have to decide what to do next. There was a man in Kano. I will call him Emmanuel. He was an Igbo Christian, which, in the context of northern Nigeria, meant that he was from a different ethnicity, a different religion, a different world entirely from the one I had always inhabited. In the framework I had lived in, Emmanuel's category of person was not someone I would have sought out for anything except the reasons I had always sought out Christians in that part of Nigeria. But Emmanuel was my neighbor. Literally, he lived 2 houses down from me, had for years. We had exchanged the minimal necessary greetings of people who share a street without sharing a world. That was all. In the weeks after the night that cracked my framework, I began to notice Emmanuel differently. He was a quiet man, a teacher at a local school. I knew this. He had a small garden that he tended with obvious care. He had a daughter who played outside in the afternoons, a girl of about 8, with the loudest laugh I had ever heard from a child that age. He had a manner about him that I noticed in a new way. He was unhurried. He seemed, and this is the word that kept coming to me, unbidden, at peace. Not the performed peace of religious correctness, something that came from deeper than that. Something that did not require the right circumstances in order to be present. I want to be clear about how extraordinary it was, given everything I had been, that I ended up on Emmanuel's porch one evening and asked him the question I asked him. I had been awake for most of 3 nights. The questions in my head had been getting louder, not quieter. I had not spoken to anyone about what was happening in me. I had no one to speak to. Everyone in my life was inside the framework, was part of the movement, would have responded to what I was feeling with alarm and suspicion, and the full corrective weight of the group's authority. I was utterly alone with what was happening. And I found myself standing at Emmanuel's gate at about 7 in the evening, while he was sitting on his porch with a book. And I asked him, without any preamble or explanation, "What is in that book that makes you the way you are?" He looked at me for a moment. He had no reason to trust me. He knew who I was. You cannot live 2 houses down from someone for years without knowing something about them. And given what I was, what I had been part of, he had every reason to be very careful with me. But he looked at me the way that certain people look at you, as if they are reading something in your face that you didn't know was written there. And he said, "Come and sit down." I sat on Emmanuel's porch, and he talked to me for 3 hours. He did not lead with doctrine. He did not immediately open his Bible and begin to present arguments. He asked me questions first. He asked about my father, about growing up in Kano, about what I had believed and why I had believed it. He listened to me in a way that no one had listened to me in years, not trying to assess whether I was sufficiently committed to the cause, not processing what I was saying in terms of whether it was doctrinally correct, just listening, as if I was a person worth listening to. And then, carefully, he began to tell me about Jesus. Not the Jesus I had been taught about, the respected prophet, the Isa of the Quran, the figure who existed in Islamic theology in a defined and limited role, but the Jesus of the Gospels, the Jesus who Emmanuel had been reading about on his porch when I arrived. He told me about the Sermon on the Mount. He told me about the feeding of the 5,000, not as a magic trick, but as a statement about a God who sees hunger and does not look away. He told me about the cross, what Christians believed it meant, why they believed the death of Jesus was not a defeat, but the central act of a rescue. I sat on that porch, and I listened, and something in me was recognizing things I could not have prepared to recognize. Not agreement, not yet. I was not ready for agreement. I had too much to dismantle first for anything to be rebuilt, but recognition, the way you recognize, when you have been in a dark room for a very long time, what light looks like when someone opens a door. I asked Emmanuel if I could borrow his Bible. He gave it to me without hesitation. He didn't put conditions on it. He didn't make me promise anything or demonstrate any particular readiness. He just handed me his Bible, a worn, annotated, clearly loved book, and said, "Read it slowly. Start with the Gospels. Ask God to show you what is true." I took it home and hid it under a floorboard in my bedroom. I want you to understand the specific texture of what it was like to read that Bible. Not the content, I'll get to the content, but the physical experience of it. Every time I took it out, I was risking something concrete and serious. My wife could have found it. One of the young men under my authority who came to the house could have found it. Anyone in my network who discovered that I had a Bible, not just a Bible, but that I had been given it by a Christian neighbor and had asked to read it, that discovery would have had consequences that went far beyond social disapproval. I knew exactly what those consequences could look like. I had been part of the framework that administered them, so every time I read, there was fear. Fear sitting right alongside the reading, like a companion I couldn't dismiss. I read in the early morning hours, when the house was completely quiet. I read by the light of a small torch. I read quickly enough to take things in, and slowly enough to let them land. And when I was done, I wrapped the Bible carefully in a cloth and put it back under the floorboard. I read the Gospels first, as Emmanuel had suggested, and the experience was, I keep trying to find the right word for it and keep coming back to the same one, which is destabilizing. Not in a frightening way, though fear was present. Destabilizing in the way that truth is destabilizing when you encounter it, After a long time of living inside a construct that has been masquerading as truth, every comfortable certainty shifts. Every fixed point moves. The ground under everything you thought you knew starts to feel less solid than it did. The Jesus I found in the Gospels was not who I expected. I had been taught, in my Islamic education, that the Christian Gospels were corrupted texts, unreliable, tampered with by human hands, not to be trusted as a source of knowledge about God. This is what I had believed. But reading them on their own terms, without the filter of that teaching, asking God simply to show me what was true, I did not find corruption. I found a portrait of a person so specific and so consistent and so strange in the best possible way that it did not read like invention. You cannot invent someone like this. The internal coherence of Jesus, across 4 different authors writing from 4 different angles. This man who tells his followers that the greatest among them is the servant of all, who says the first shall be last, who touches the untouchable and eats with the excluded, who offers forgiveness to the people crucifying him while he is being crucified. You cannot fabricate this level of consistency. It has the texture of something true. But it was a specific passage that did to me what the face of a person in crisis had done to my framework on that earlier night. It was in the Gospel of Matthew, the 11th chapter. Jesus says, "Come to me, all of you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light." I read that passage at 4 in the morning with a torch in my hand under the covers of my bed. And I read it again, and I read it a 3rd time. "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." I had been carrying the weight of 17 years of certainty that had turned out not to be certainty at all. 17 years of a yoke that was not easy, and a burden that was not light. 17 years of a God who required more from you the more you gave him, who was never fully satisfied, who held paradise over your head like a destination that receded the closer you got to it. And here was a voice saying, "Come to me. I will give you rest. My burden is light." I put the torch off. I lay in the dark. And for the first time since the night that cracked everything open, the internal noise quieted. Not because the situation was resolved. Not because the danger was gone, or the questions were answered, or the path forward was clear, but because something had spoken to the part of me that was most exhausted, the part that had been straining under a weight I had carried for half my life, and had said, "You can put it down." I began to pray, not in Arabic, not in the forms I had always used, but simply, directly, in Hausa, in the language of my childhood. I said, "I don't know if you are real the way they say you are, but if you are, if this is true, then I need what you are offering. I need the rest. I need something real. Please, show me." Over the following 3 months, I met with Emmanuel several more times. Always carefully, always in the early evening, briefly, in a way that could be explained as neighborly interaction if anyone was watching. He answered my questions with patience and without pressure. He prayed for me without making a performance of it. He was, in the way that certain people are, simply present. Available without being pushy, consistent without being aggressive, warm without being naive about the risks involved. He understood the situation. He lived in northern Nigeria. He knew exactly what was at stake. I asked him once, "Are you afraid of what could happen if people knew you were talking to me about this?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Yes, I am afraid sometimes, but I am more afraid of standing before God and having to explain why I let fear keep me from telling the truth to someone who was asking for it." I thought about that answer for weeks. The moment I made the decision, not intellectually, but fully, in the deep part of me where real decisions are made, the moment I decided that Jesus was who he claimed to be and that I was going to follow him regardless of what it cost, came on a Sunday morning. I know it was Sunday because I was supposed to be leading a session with the youth group that morning and I didn't go. I sat in my house instead, and I took the Bible out from under the floorboard, and I read the account of the resurrection in the Gospel of John, and I put the book down and I said, out loud in my empty room, "I believe this. I believe you are alive. I believe you are who you said you are. I am yours." That was the moment. It was quiet. There was no dramatic vision, no voice from heaven, no extraordinary sensation. Just A man in a room in Kano, saying out loud what had been building in his heart for months. A man crossing a line. I knew, the moment I crossed it, that everything was going to change. I was not naive about what I had done or what it meant. I had spent 17 years on the other side of this line. I knew exactly what happened to people who crossed it. I had been part of what happened to some of them. I told Emmanuel that week. He held my hands and prayed over me, and wept. Not with dramatic emotion, but with the quiet, full tears of a man who has been carrying a prayer for a long time and has just received an answer. He connected me to a pastor in another part of the city, a man I will call Pastor Daniel, and over the following weeks I began very carefully to meet with him as well. During this period I was still, on the surface, maintaining my role in the movement. I was still showing up, still performing the functions I was supposed to perform, still appearing, to everyone around me, to be the man they knew. The double life was unsustainable. I knew that from the beginning, but I needed time. I needed to understand what came next before I could make what was coming next survivable. I had been living this way for about 6 weeks when my wife found the Bible. She found it while I was out. She did not bring it up immediately. She had the presence of mind to put it back where she found it and wait. She waited 2 days. I think she spent those 2 days trying to decide what to do, what she was seeing. Whether there was an innocent explanation, there was not. She knew what a Bible was. She knew that a Bible hidden under a floorboard in her husband's house meant something specific and devastating. She confronted me on a Thursday evening after the children were asleep. She came into the room where I was sitting, and she placed the Bible on the table between us, and she looked at me. She did not shout. My wife was not a woman who shouted. She was a woman of controlled, precise, deep feeling. She said nothing for a long moment, and then she said, "Tell me this is not what I think it is." I could have lied. I want to be honest about that. Lying was an option that was available to me. I could have invented an explanation, claimed I was doing research, claimed I was studying the enemy's beliefs in order to counter them better, made something up that would have given her a door to walk through back toward normalcy. She might even have taken it. She might have wanted badly enough to believe it that she would have let herself believe it. I did not lie. I had already decided, in the room on Sunday morning when I said out loud what I believed, that I was not going to build this new life on the same foundation of concealment and performance that I had already spent too many years on. I looked at my wife, the mother of my sons, the woman who had stood beside me in the life I had been living, and I told her the truth. What followed was the hardest conversation of my life, harder than the conversation with Sheikh Musa that eventually came. Harder than any of the confrontations that happened later. Because this was not an adversary. This was a woman who loved me, and who was being told that the man she loved had, in the most fundamental way, become someone other than who she had agreed to spend her life with. She wept. She asked me questions, theological questions, questions about what I had read and what I had concluded, real questions, the questions of a woman trying to understand how this had happened. I answered them honestly. I told her about the night that cracked the framework. I told her about Emmanuel's porch. I told her about Matthew 11. I told her about Sunday morning in the empty room. And at the end of all of it, she said, quietly, with absolute clarity, "I cannot be with someone who has left Islam. You know that. You know what this means. I cannot protect you, and I cannot follow you, and I cannot stay." She was not wrong. She was not cruel. She was a woman who believed what she believed, and who was telling me the truth about it. I had asked her for the truth in my way, by telling her mine, and she gave it to me. She took the children to her mother's house the following day. She told them their father was sick. She was trying to protect them from the full weight of it for as long as she could, and I honored her for that. My sons were 6 and 4 years old. They left with their mother, and they looked back at me from the gate with their small, confused faces, and I held it together until they turned the corner, and then I did not hold it together at all. That was the beginning of losing everything. I need to stop here for a moment, because I know that someone watching this is in a place right now where the cost feels too high. Where you are looking at what following Jesus might cost you, your marriage, your children, your community, your safety, and you are thinking, "I cannot pay that price." I want to tell you something. I am not going to tell you the price isn't real. It is real. I paid it. It cost exactly what it looked like it was going to cost. I am not going to soften that for you. What I want to tell you is, there is something on the other side of the cost that I did not know existed before I paid it. something that does not come any other way. I could not have described it to you before I found it. I'm going to try to describe it by the end of this video. Stay with me, and if you are carrying something heavy right now, drop it in the comments. Just the weight of it. You don't have to give details. Just, I'm here. I see you. Now let me keep going. Once my wife left, things moved quickly. She had not yet told Sheikh Musa or anyone in the movement. I think she was trying to determine what to do, perhaps hoping I would reverse course, perhaps trying to protect her own position and my son's position if this could be handled quietly. But within 2 weeks, the situation had become too large to contain quietly. Someone saw something. There was a conversation that reached the wrong ears. The movement has eyes everywhere. I knew this better than anyone. And when those eyes turned toward me, there was very little I could do to control what they found. Sheikh Musa sent for me. I went. I sat across from the man who had been the most significant figure in my adult life, my teacher, my authority, in some ways the father figure of my entire ideological world. And I looked at his face, which was not angry, but was something worse than angry. It was the face of a man confronting a betrayal that he could not fully comprehend. He had built things on me. He had trusted me with things. He had believed in me in the specific way that a man like him believes in his most committed disciples. And I had, in his understanding, not just left, I had gone to the enemy. He asked me directly, "Have you become a Christian?" I said yes. He sat with that for a long moment. Then he said, and I will not forget these words for the rest of my life. He said, "Then you are dead to me. You are dead to your family. You are dead to everything we built. And if you do not find your way back quickly, you may find yourself dead in ways that are not metaphorical." That last sentence was not a metaphor. He was not being dramatic. In the context we were in northern Nigeria, in the movement I had been part of, it was a statement of realistic possibility. I had been part of that movement long enough to know exactly what he meant and to take it seriously. I left his compound that afternoon knowing that my time in Kano was measured in days, perhaps hours. I had nowhere to go. My wife was gone. My house was no longer safe. I had to assume it was being watched. My network, my community, every social resource I had built over 17 years, all of it was now actively hostile to my survival. I went to Emmanuel's house. He let me in without questions. I sat in his small living room and told him what had happened, and he listened, and then he made some phone calls. He had a network, a different kind of network from the one I had been part of, but a network nonetheless. People who helped people in situations like mine. That night I slept on Emmanuel's floor. The following morning, very early, I left Kano. I am going to be honest with you about the journey out of Kano and out of the situation I was in, while being careful not to endanger anyone who helped me. What I will tell you is that it was not clean, and it was not quick, and there were moments where I was genuinely uncertain whether I would survive it. I spent 3 weeks moving through Nigeria by routes and means that I will not describe. There were people who helped me, some of them Christians who ran informal networks for people in situations like mine. Some of them simply ordinary people who made judgments about a man in need and chose to help him. I am alive partly because of people whose names I cannot give you, who took risks for a stranger because they believed it was right. I think about those people with gratitude that I cannot fully express. During those weeks of moving and hiding and not knowing what was coming next, I had nothing. I want to be specific about this. I had no phone. I had left it in Kano because it was a tracking device. I had no money beyond what fit in my pocket. I had no documents that were safe to use. I had no contact with my sons. I did not know where my wife was or how they were. I had no community, no network, no structure. I had the clothes I was wearing and a paperback New Testament that Pastor Daniel had pressed into my hands the morning I left, which was small enough to fit in my pocket. That was all. And I want to tell you about those 3 weeks, because those 3 weeks were, in terms of external circumstances, the worst of my life. And they were also, in terms of interior experience, the most unexpectedly alive I had ever felt. I read that pocket New Testament in every spare moment I had. I read it by whatever light was available. Street lights, phone screens belonging to other people, the light through a window. I had no theological training in Christianity, no pastor to explain things to me, no community to interpret things through. It was just me and the text. And the text was speaking to me in ways that felt, the only word I can find is direct. It felt like it was aimed at me specifically, like it had been written for a man in exactly this situation, with exactly these losses, in exactly this kind of darkness. Philippians 4:11. I have learned, in whatever state I am, to be content. Paul wrote that from prison. A man who had lost his former life and his former standing and his former certainty, writing from captivity about contentment. I read it under a streetlight in a city I did not know, and I thought, he knew. He actually knew what this feels like. Romans 8:38. For I am sure that neither death nor life, nor angels, nor rulers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus our Lord. Nothing. Nothing in all creation. Not the loss of my wife. Not my son's small, confused faces at the gate. Not Sheikh Musa's cold verdict. Not the 3 weeks of running. Not anything. Nothing could separate me from this. I did not feel triumphant reading these things. I want to be very clear about that. I felt them the way you feel a solid surface under your feet when you have been falling. Not with joy exactly, but with something more fundamental than joy. With relief that the ground was there, that there was a ground, that underneath all the falling there was something that held. I eventually reached Lagos in southern Nigeria, a different world from Kano, culturally, religiously, in terms of the risk environment. From Lagos, through a process that took many months and involved legal channels and organizations that work with people in situations like mine, I eventually obtained refugee status and came to the United Kingdom. I have been in the UK now for 5 years. I live in Leeds. I work. I attend a church where people know my story and do not require me to pretend it is simpler than it is. I want to talk about the shape of loss, because I think this is something that does not get spoken about honestly enough in testimonies like mine. There is a version of the conversion story that implies that what you lose cleanly, that you hand it over and it is gone and you move forward. That is not what loss feels like from the inside. Loss is not clean. It is not a single event. It is a recurring one. It arrives again and again in ordinary moments that you were not prepared for. I lost my sons. I use that language deliberately. I did not lose contact with them temporarily or lose them in a legal dispute that might be resolved. I have had no contact with my sons in 5 years. I do not know what they have been told. I do not know what their lives look like. I do not know what they know about me or what they think of what happened. My oldest son was 6 years old the last time I saw his face. He is 11 now. He is a different person than the child who looked back at me from the gate, and I am a stranger to that person. I want to say something about this that is true, and that is also hard. The grief of this loss does not go away. It does not become smaller with time in the way that some griefs become smaller. It lives in me at a consistent depth. There are days when I wake up, and the first thing in my mind is my sons, their faces, their voices, what they like to eat, the specific sound of their laughter. There are days when it is almost unbearable, and yet, and this is the thing I need to say clearly, because it is the thing that makes my story different from a story that ends in despair. Underneath the grief, there is peace. Not in spite of the grief, not instead of the grief. Underneath it, a layer deeper than the pain. Something that the pain sits on top of and cannot reach. Something that was not there before, that I did not know was possible, that I found in the pages of a worn Bible and on Emmanuel's porch and in 3 weeks of running with nothing in my pocket but a small New Testament. I want to try to explain what that peace feels like, because I think it is the most important thing I have to tell you. I am a man who spent 17 years serving a cause that promised me certainty, and I found certainty. But it was the certainty of a closed system, a certainty that depended on the walls staying up, on the framework remaining intact. When the framework cracked, the certainty collapsed with it, because the certainty and the framework were the same thing. Remove one, and you remove both. What I have now is not that kind of certainty. I want to be honest about that. I have questions I cannot answer. I have things I do not fully understand. I have experiences of God that are real to me and that I cannot prove to anyone who is determined not to believe them. What I have is not a closed system of guaranteed answers. What I have is a relationship with a person. That is the only way I know how to describe it. A real, ongoing, living relationship with Jesus Christ, who I believe is alive, not as a concept, not as a historical figure who died 2,000 years ago and left a text behind, but alive, present, knowable, who I have encountered not in dramatic visions, but in the way you encounter a person who is with you, in the quality of what happens when you pray, in the specific way the text speaks on specific days, in the sense of being known that does not depend on any external confirmation. I am known, by name, by history, by the worst of what I have done and the best of what I have hoped for, known and not rejected. The peace I have is not the peace of having no problems. My problems are not small. The peace I have is the peace of being held while having problems. There is a difference between those two things, and I could not have understood the difference before I experienced it. In my former life, faith was supposed to be armor, something you put on to protect yourself from the hardships of the world. What I have found is different. What I have found is presence, not armor, but company. Not protection from the hard things, but someone who is in the hard things with you. The difference between those two kinds of faith is the difference between a wall and a person. A wall keeps things out. A person stays with you when things get in. Jesus does not keep things out of my life. My sons are still gone. My former world is still closed to me. The grief is still real, but he is in it with me. And on the days when the grief is at its deepest, there is something underneath it that says, I am here. You are held. This is not the end. There is more coming that you cannot see yet. I choose to believe that, not because I can prove it, because it is the most real thing I have ever found, and I have tested it against the worst conditions my life has offered, and it has not failed. The framework failed. The certainty of the closed system failed. This has not failed. Not in 5 years of loss and rebuilding and grief, and the ordinary difficulty of starting over in a new country. Not once. That is the peace I have found. That is what I want you to know is possible. Not the easy version. Not the version where everything gets restored, and the family is reconciled, and the story ends neatly. The hard version. The version where you lose things that do not come back, and you find, in the middle of that loss, something that is stronger than the loss. Something that the loss cannot reach. The yoke is easy. The burden is light. I did not understand those words for years. I understand them now. Not because my circumstances are easy. They are not. But because what I carry now, I do not carry alone. And that changes everything about the weight of it. Friends, I want to say something directly to you right now. I know that some of you watching this are in the place I was in. Inside a framework that has given you certainty, but not peace. Inside a version of faith that requires everything from you and leaves you feeling like you are never enough. Inside a system that you have given years to and that you are beginning, quietly, to question. I want to tell you, those questions are not the enemy's work. Those questions are the most honest thing about you. And the God I found, the God who says, "Come to me if you are weary, I will give you rest." That God is not afraid of your questions. He invites them. He is patient with the time it takes to walk through them. He was patient with me for 3 months on my neighbor's porch and under a floorboard, and in 3 weeks of running. He will be patient with you. If this is speaking to something in you, tell me in the comments. I read everyone. And now let me finish. I have a few more things to tell you. I want to tell you how I understand God now, compared to how I understood him before. Because I think the difference is the most important thing in my story, and I want to try to get it right. Before, God was a judge, an absolute, perfect, demanding judge. He had given humanity his law, and the measure of a person's life was how completely they conformed to that law. Grace existed in Islamic theology. I had been taught about rahmah, about mercy, but the mercy was conditional, was earned, was distributed in proportion to effort and intention and correct performance. God was, fundamentally, someone you tried to satisfy. Someone whose approval you were always in the process of pursuing. Someone whose paradise was the destination and whose hell was the threat that kept you on the road toward it. After, God is a father. More specifically, God is the father in the story that Jesus told, the one who runs, who has been watching down the road, who does not wait for his child to demonstrate worthiness before he runs toward them, whose first response to the returning child is not assessment, but embrace, whose love does not begin when the performance is adequate, whose love was there before any performance, will be there after any failure, cannot be earned or lost because it is not transactional. It simply is. This difference between a God you must satisfy and a God who already loves you, this is not a small difference. It is the difference between a cage and an open field. It is the difference between carrying a debt you can never fully pay and receiving a gift that has already been given. I spent 17 years in the cage. I know what it feels like. I am in the open field now. I know the difference. I also think differently about the cross now than I did before I became a Christian, even than I did in my first months as a believer, when I understood it intellectually but had not yet understood it the way you understand something that has touched your specific life. The cross is where God, in Jesus, took onto himself the weight of everything that has ever gone wrong with the world and with the people in it. Everything I was part of during 17 years of the movement. Everything I did that I am ashamed of. Everything that was done to people I was involved in harming. The cross says, all of it. I took all of it. It is done. Now live. That is not permission to be careless about the harm. I am not careless. I think about the people affected by what I was part of regularly, with grief that is genuine and ongoing. I have done what I can, which is limited from where I am, but not zero, to acknowledge and address what I was part of. But the cross gives me the possibility of doing that without being destroyed by the weight of it, without the weight becoming the thing that finishes me before I have had the chance to use what I have been given for something better. I am building something better. Slowly, in Leeds, in an ordinary church with ordinary people, teaching in a community center, talking to young men who remind me of myself at 14 before Sheikh Musa found me, and trying to offer them what Emmanuel offered me. Not pressure, not arguments, just presence, honesty. The answer to the question, what is in that book that makes you the way you are? I want to talk about my sons one more time, because I do not want to leave them as a footnote. Their names are Ibrahim and Khalid. Ibrahim is 11 now. Khalid is 9. I do not know their faces as they are today. I have only the faces I last saw, which were the faces of a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old. I imagine them sometimes. I imagine Ibrahim at 11, probably serious, probably good at school. I think he would be because he was already that way at 6. I imagine Khalid at 9, probably still laughing easily the way he did as a child, the way my mother laughed. I pray for them every day. Twice a day, specifically. I include them by name in every prayer, and then I hold them, not physically, not in any way I can describe as tangible, but I hold them in the way you hold things in prayer, which is to say, I bring them to God, and I say, you know them. You love them more than I am capable of loving them. You are near them in ways I cannot be. Please be near them. Please be the presence for them that I cannot be. Please keep them. Please, someday, if it is possible, let them know that their father loved them and did not leave because he stopped loving them. I have to believe it is the choice that keeps me functional, that the God who sees the sparrow fall and who knows the hairs on every head knows where my sons are and is with them, that the pursuing love I found is also pursuing them, that the God who ran toward me, all the way through 17 years of a movement I am ashamed of, all the way through the crack and the floorboard and Emmanuel's porch and 3 weeks of running, that God is running toward my sons too, in ways I cannot see, in ways that are not finished yet. I hold that. I hold it the way you hold something fragile in strong hands, carefully, with full awareness of what it is, without gripping it so hard that you damage it. I hold it as a hope, not a certainty. I hold it as a prayer that I believe is heard, and I wait. I want to speak directly to the men who are watching this, who are where I was, not just in an Islamic context, though certainly to those men, but to any man who has been inside a framework of radical certainty, a framework that gave him identity and belonging, and a cause to fight for, and a very clear map of who the enemies were and what righteousness required. Any man who has given years to that kind of framework and who is beginning, in the quiet moments, to hear a question underneath it that the framework cannot absorb. I know who you are. I was you. I know what it feels like to have your entire sense of self built on a cause. I know what it feels like to have the cause crack. I know the specific vertigo of it, the way everything spins when the fixed point moves. I know the temptation to suppress the question, to double down on the certainty, to invest more deeply in the framework precisely because you can feel it starting to give way under you. I want to say this to you. The question underneath the framework is not weakness. It is the most honest thing about you. It is you, in your deepest self, asking whether what you have been given is actually true. That question deserves to be followed. It is terrifying to follow it. I know this personally. It may cost you things you cannot afford to lose. I know this also personally. But the alternative, suppressing the question, performing the certainty, spending the rest of your life inside a framework that you know, in the deepest part of you, does not hold. That alternative is a kind of death that happens while you are still alive. I am more alive now with nothing than I was before with everything the framework offered. That is not a small statement. I am saying it with full knowledge of what nothing looks like, because I have lived it. More alive with nothing than before with everything. The only explanation I have for that is Jesus. The only thing that accounts for the peace I described earlier, the peace underneath the loss, the layer deeper than the grief, is the person I found in the gospel and have been in relationship with ever since. If you are a man who has been part of something radical, something that caused harm, something you are ashamed of, I want to tell you specifically, the cross is large enough to hold it, all of it, everything. I believed this as a theological proposition for a while before I understood it as a personal reality. Now I understand it as a personal reality. It holds all of it. There is nothing too heavy. There is nothing too dark. There is no history that puts you outside the reach of what was done at Calvary. Nothing. Come. If you are weary, if you are burdened, come. Let me tell you what I have. 5 years on from losing everything. I have a small flat in Leeds with a good window that gets morning light. I make tea every morning and sit by that window and pray and read and watch the light change, and it is one of the best parts of my day. That is not a small thing. I have a church community that knows my full story and loves me anyway. That is not a small thing either. I have a pastor who has sat with me through grief that had no resolution and who has never tried to give me easy answers when easy answers would have been false. I have people who call me by name and are glad when I walk into a room. I have a faith that has been tested against the worst conditions my life has offered and has not failed. Not once. Not the loss of my family. Not the loneliness. Not the nights when my sons' faces are the last thing I think of before I sleep. Through all of it, the presence I found has remained. The peace underneath the grief has remained. The conviction that I am held, that I am known, that I am not alone, that there is more ahead than what I can currently see. That has remained. It has been the most consistent thing in my life. It is what I have built on. It is what I continue to build on. I have a story that is not finished. This is important. I am 38 years old. I have, God willing, a great deal of life still ahead of me. I do not know what it holds. I do not know if I will ever see my sons again. I do not know how God is going to use what has happened to me. I know, because this is what my faith tells me and what my experience confirms, that none of it is wasted. That the 17 years in the movement, as terrible as some of what I was part of was, gave me a specific knowledge and a specific credibility with a specific group of people that nothing else could have given me. That the Emmanuel on my street saw something in my face and chose to answer my question and give me his Bible. That the crack in the framework was not an accident. That the question underneath the certainty was placed there by someone who knew it was there and was waiting for the right moment to bring it to the surface. I am here, Yusuf, named for the prophet who was thrown in a pit by his brothers and who survived and who forgave them and who said, at the end of it all, you meant it for evil. God meant it for good. I believe that. About my own story, about the pit and the running and the losses and the flat with the good window in Leeds. God meant it for good. Not yet fully visible, not yet fully formed, but for good. I am certain of that. For the first time in my adult life, I am certain of something that does not depend on a framework to hold it up. It holds itself up. He holds it. He holds me. That is enough. That is more than enough. That is, in the end, everything. Before I finish, I want to say thank you for staying with this story. I know it was not easy to hear in places. I did not make it easy deliberately, because the easy version would have been a lie, and you deserve the true version. If this testimony gave you something today, if it reached somewhere in you that needed reaching, please do not keep it to yourself. Share it. One person. That is all I am asking. One person who might need to hear that there is peace available that does not depend on circumstances, that there is a God who runs, that there is a rest that is real, and that is being offered right now, not when your life is sorted out, not when you are worthy enough, but now, exactly as you are, exactly where you are. Subscribe to this channel. Ring the bell. More testimonies are coming. More voices, more stories, more people who found what I found by very different paths. Each one matters. Each one is evidence. And to the man watching this, who is in the middle of the worst of it right now, the man who has lost or is losing things he cannot afford to lose, I want to say this last thing directly to you. He is there. He has been there the whole time. He saw you before you saw him, and he is not going anywhere. You are not too far gone. There is no such thing as too far gone. He came for the lost. He came specifically for the lost. And if you are lost right now, that means you are exactly who he came for. My name is Yusuf Okonkwo. This is my testimony, and it is not over yet.